Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar. Today we have Justyna Lucznik presenting AI and Power BI. Justyna, I won't waste any time and just give you the floor.
Awesome, thank you so much. So hi everyone, my name is Justyna Lucznik. I'm a program manager on the Power BI team, and I work on the AI features inside Power BI. And so when we think about AI and Power BI, and I'm just gonna minimize this, there we go. And the things that we're going to be going through today, we're going to be giving an overview of all of the different areas that we are investing inside Power BI when it comes to AI features. And as we go through this presentation, you'll see that these investments really span the whole kind of persona base, ranging from our end business users who are consuming reports to our analysts who are going ahead and authoring the reports consumed by business users, our BI professionals, and even our data scientists. And so when we think about AI and Power BI, the kinds of areas that we're investing in, and essentially this presentation today is going to be going through a number of different demos that span across all of these different areas. Sometimes in the demos, we're going to be covering one of these boxes. Sometimes we're going to be covering multiple of these boxes. But what I wanted to do is just start by giving you a quick overview of all of the different areas we are investing in, and then really diving deep into them to show you, essentially showcasing these capabilities through demos. So this is going to be a very demo-driven session. From an end user perspective, we're investing in really how do we enable end users to quickly and effectively find insights in their data without having to essentially do their own slicing and dicing of data? Can we just help them surface insights? And can we make it easier for them to ask questions that they might have in their mind, maybe when the report isn't quite answering it for them, using natural language? For the analysts, we're really investing in a toolkit of capabilities that touch on machine learning, where an analyst is able to benefit maybe from even similar tools that data scientists would be using, but without having to write any code. So you're going to see a number of different capabilities where we are enabling essentially one-click transformations for analysts to be able to carry out common tasks that they might need to, that they may want to do. And we're going to kind of see how we're integrating some of the Azure technologies directly into Power BI to enable those scenarios, as well as being able to actually author their own machine learning models directly inside Power BI. And then if we look at more of the data scientist kind of persona all the way to the right, one of the things we are not trying to do with Power BI is to compete with things like R or Python or Azure Machine Learning. We're trying to allow Power BI to become an integration point, an extensibility point for these tools. So we are working on integrating with tools like R and Python and integrating Azure Machine Learning directly into the product rather than trying to compete with them. And again, we're going to kind of take a look at how we're carrying out some of this in order to enable these scenarios. So if, to start off with, if I go to the next slide, we're going to kind of take a look at this first box over here, which is how we are helping some of our end users explore their data by using natural language, as well as be able to quickly get insights, leveraging something that we call quick insights inside the product. So with that, I'm going to jump into Power BI. And you'll see we're going to have two themes today in terms of our demos. One is really going to be looking at kind of hospitality and tourism, and the other is going to be looking at healthcare. So we're going to start with our tourism scenarios, which is looking at Hawaii tourism. And generally, the state of Hawaii collects a lot of statistics about the various visitors to the islands. So we've went ahead and brought in some of that data and started authoring some reports on top of that. And so what you'll notice over here, and I'm actually going to remove this so I can kind of show you this from scratch. But if I go into my buttons over here, you're going to see that I'm actually able to add a Q&A button directly into Power BI. So as an analyst, if I'm authoring a report, I can go ahead and select this, and I think these will be the same color, so I'm just going to change this fill to be a little bit lighter. Sorry, apologies. Let me just set my teams on, I thought I set it on Do Not Disturb, but sorry about that. Otherwise, it's going to keep popping up. Awesome. Okay, so what I'm going to do over here is I've got this Q&A button that I've gone ahead and set up, and I'm just going to bring it into my report over here. And so as an analyst, if I'm authoring a report for a business user, I can just add a Q&A button directly into the report. And what is that going to enable for the business user? So, let's take a look at, how a business user could use this. So I could basically just be able to click into this Q&A button. And when I do that, it's going to pop up this Q&A dialog for me. Now you'll see that we have some questions to get our users started on the left-hand side. These questions were not prepared by the analyst. As you saw, I just added the button myself. And so all of these questions are actually automatically generated by the system. So, if I want to, kind of interact with these, it's, going to basically automatically start plotting visualizations for me. So it kind of helps me get started. But I can also type in my own questions, which is really what I'm interested in doing here more. So let's go ahead and let's maybe look at visits by date, and maybe also let's take a look at it by an island. And basically, as I start plotting, asking a question over here, Power BI is automatically going to generate a visualization for me. So this is really handy when, first of all, I might have, kind of explored the report, and maybe there are questions that I still have after exploring the report and they haven't quite been answered. I can basically extend Power BI by asking my own questions, and I can ask them in just using natural language, which is a much more intuitive way for someone who maybe, isn't used to working with cubes and plotting data and, formatting charts. They can just ask a question, really, really easily, and Power BI will automatically try and generate the best visual that it can. Now over here, for example, we're looking at our visits by date to the various Hawaii islands, and we can automatically start seeing some insights where you can kind of see that for Oahu we have a lot of visitors kind of consistently across the whole year. And then there's 2 islands over here, and if we kind of hover over them, we can see that's actually Lanai and Molokai that basically have not received any visitors at all. And after we did some digging, it turns out actually that Lanai is owned by Larry Ellison, so you basically need a private jet to get there. There's like just pretty much no hotels, so it's super exclusive. And Molokai used to be a leper colony. So those were kind of the reasons that we found when we saw this data as to why these visits are so low. Now imagine this was an interesting insight that I wanted to share with my business user. I could basically just add this question, and along with the suggestions that are generated by Power BI, we now have a question that was prepared by the report author that I can always come back to as a business user to see that, kind of either as a starting point for my analysis or, as kind of just something interesting to go into. But I can carry on asking, questions. Maybe I want to look at visits by date and region now. And that's going to plot me, instead of visits to the island, it's going to plot me where specifically are my visitors coming from. And, I might want to kind of keep this context, but ask a related question to this. So when I ask a related questions, I can maybe say, okay, I'm looking at visits by date and region, but actually I only want to look at people who came to Hawaii for, and if I could spell, you could see Power BI automatically autocorrected that for me. But for maybe I only want to look at people who came for a honeymoon. And now I kind of almost get a story of my data as I kind of explore this, where I can see, okay, so this is what my visits look like. If I look across, maybe here I can see US West has definitely the highest number of visitors. But when we only look at honeymoons, we can see that distribution changes a lot. And actually now it looks like the highest number of visitors are for actually my Japanese tourists, and US West is kind of lower down. And again, we did some digging, and actually turns out that 50% of Japanese honeymoons that take place outside of Japan actually take place in Hawaii. So again, we were kind of able to explore this insight and find out more about it. So this is basically the Power BI Q&A conversational capabilities that a business user can benefit from. We're going to be having a lot more capabilities coming into Q&A in the coming months, so stay tuned for some of the changes and updates that are coming for this experience. Now, the other side of things is, imagine I want to just be able to quickly get some insights out of my data. And so what I'm going to do over here is, usually if I was to interact with my report, I might go ahead and, select a visualization, see how other things update to try and start, finding some insights inside my data. But with Power BI, we want to automate this process for our users. So what I can basically do is, if I have a visualization, such as my visits by island over here, I can just right-click on this visual and ask Power BI to analyze it. And Power BI automatically suggests the type of analysis that I might want to run when I view this visual. So here we might want to look at understanding where the distribution is different. So let's take a look at what that actually means. On our original graph, we were simply looking at visits to the various islands, such as Oahu, Maui, Hawaii, and so on. Now, Power BI just went ahead, ran some analysis, and sliced and diced all my data to try and understand, when does the distribution of these visits to these islands change when another filter is applied? And so what we found over here, for example, the gray line that you see, that's our original distribution, the one that we see inside this visualization. And the blue distribution is what it looks like when we just look at our first-time visitors. So we can very quickly get an understanding that, when someone visits Hawaii or visits the Hawaii Islands for the first time, they're much more likely to be going to Oahu, as that blue bar is higher than the original distribution. And all of the other islands are actually lower. So as a first-time visitor, you're more likely to go to Oahu. And then if we look at repeat visitors, we can see it's, the opposite pattern. And I can scroll through the various insights that we were basically able to find. Again, if I'm an analyst, I'm preparing this for my business user, I can simply add this to the report and maybe slot it in somewhere. But in this case, we've already got a report full up, so I'm going to go ahead and delete this visual. But you'll also notice that the type of analysis that I get really depends on what I'm actually plotting. So over here, for example, if we look at our visits by region, if I, let's say, go and see this, there's been a dip over here, I can actually analyze and explain the decrease. So you can see we're not being asked about distribution changes, we're actually being asked about decreasing. And this is because we know that this is a time series visualization, so we're looking at trends across time. So we want to explain why a particular trend has fallen. And again, Power BI automatically analyzes the data. This time around, it has given me a different visualization type. And we can see that, we have a waterfall chart here where we're comparing US West visits in August to September, because that's where we saw this fall. And we can tell you what has changed between those 2 months. And what we see that there's actually been an increase in honeymoon visits and conventions, but not surprisingly, maybe from August to September, we saw a fall in vacations. And that's kind of been really driving that fall in terms of visits. So you could imagine how this could apply to maybe a fall in sales, or maybe a fall in customer satisfaction scores, where you might want to analyze what has actually been causing this dip. So these are the automated kind of insights capabilities inside Power BI. As well as the natural ability to traverse your data using natural language. So if we jump back into the presentation for a second, again, these slides are really just going to be framing slides to look at, what kinds of capabilities we're going to be covering. But the next area I want to talk about is focus more on the analyst experience. And here we're going to be touching upon a couple of different areas. We're going to be touching upon how the analyst is able to prepare something called AI visualizations for an end user to consume and get more insights. We're going to be looking at some of the one-click AI transformations that an analyst can do when they're doing their data preparation. And we're also going to look at how they can leverage work that has been done by the data scientists in other tools directly inside Power BI to gain more insights. So with that, we're going to be sticking to the Hawaii tourism kind of theme, but we're going to start out inside the Power BI service now. And I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with Power BI Dataflows. I'm just going to give a very brief kind of overview of Dataflows in case someone hasn't seen this before. But we've basically introduced a new tab into Power BI alongside our dashboards and our reports. We now have Dataflows appearing over here. And Dataflows are basically reusable, repeatable ETL processes that an analyst or BI professional is able to set up in order to do data preparation at an enterprise level. Now, usually if I was to prepare my data in Power BI, I would maybe, if we go back into our report over here, I'd go into edit queries, and I would have my Power Query kind of interface over here where I could do all of my data preparations, and I might have some data over here, and I could do all of my different transformations. They get saved as applied steps, and then I apply my changes and I do my reporting. Here we've basically decoupled that data preparation away from the data reporting layer. So what this means is I can create reusable, repeatable ETL processes that I can then connect multiple different reports to and build multiple different reports on top of. And so over here, for example, we can see that we're pulling data in from lots of different sources. And then all of these boxes that you see over here, and I'm going to just open up my Zoom it so we can take a look at a little bit of a closer look. So all of these boxes that you see with this particular icon are data flows. And so what I want to do is actually go into one of these data flows and show you what kinds of changes you can make to it in order to be able to do your data transformations. So I'm going to edit the entities inside my data flow. You can think of entities just as tables that I've brought in, and I could have connected, multiple different sources to my data flow. In this case, I'm just bringing in a CSV extract, but it could be, SQL, it could be, other databases. So we are looking to get on parity with whatever Power BI desktop would support in terms of the get data experience. And you'll notice over here, if you remember the Power Query experience in Power BI, this is a very similar interface where you have all the different transformations that you're able to do. You can add columns, you can transform your tables, reduce rows, and all of your steps get saved as end steps here on the right-hand side. Now, in this case, we have some data about various hotels. So in this case, imagine I have a chain of different hotels, and I have a number, lots and lots of customer reviews about these hotels. And I've got my review text over here, and I've got all of my images associated with these reviews over here. And generally, I want to be able to extract out insights from this data, but in Power BI, it's very hard to slice and dice data that's, unstructured, messy, maybe, images like, links over here. So I need to be able to add some structure to this data to be able to do more with it. And that's where basically this AI Insights button comes in over here inside. And this is something that's only available inside the Dataflows interface. Currently, we are working on making this available on the desktop too. But right now, this is just available inside Dataflows. And what this basically allows us to do is allows us to bring machine learning models from Azure and the Azure Cognitive Services directly into Power BI. So if we start out with cognitive services, for those of you who are not familiar with cognitive services, these are sophisticated pre-trained machine learning models that exist inside Azure today. And if you want to use them inside Azure, for example, you want to do some textual analytics on top of your data, you can do that by spinning up a cognitive service, getting out the key, figuring out how you're going to be calling the cognitive services, where you're going to be storing the results, how is that whole kind of pipeline going to be operationalized. So there's a lot of different steps that you need to do, and it requires, coding, being able to write, let's say, Python, C# code to be able to do that. Now, with the cognitive services in Power BI, it was really important for us to be able to enable these capabilities in a low-code, no-code way so that everyone can benefit from them. And so if I want to, for example, extract out all the key phrases from inside my text, all I have to do is essentially say, well, this is where my text field sits. And that's pretty much it. That's literally all I have to do. And that's going to invoke the cognitive service. So you'll see I have a new step created on the right-hand side. And if we look at my data, we can see all of the cognitive services that were extracted out. So we can see here, for example, we have someone talking about, elevator. That's the one key phrase that we extracted out. And if we look at the actual text, we can see, in this particular case, someone is talking about the elevator being broken. So I can keep doing this if I want to add other cognitive services. Imagine I want to score my sentiment. Again, all I have to do is say, yeah, this is where my text field sits. I didn't have to code anything up. It's just going to run, and it's going to run all of the data through this cognitive service. And again, it's going to create another new column for me, this time looking at sentiment, and sentiment was measured between 0 and 1, where 0 is very bad, 1 is very good. And we can see, our elevator was broken, comment over here indeed has a very, very poor sentiment score, which is, what we would expect. And I can, very, very easily do the same thing if I want to actually also bring in machine learning models that my data scientist has built in Azure. So the cognitive services, these are out of the box. These are pre-trained. You can use them and leverage them for any textual analytics, image detection, today. Azure machine learning models, if you're not familiar with Azure machine learning, this is our essentially our machine learning authoring environments inside Azure, which a data scientist would use to be able to author and operationalize, deploy machine learning models. Now, in my case, what I want to do is I've got this hotel image model that you'll see over here that I've created, that my data science has created. And what I want to be able to do is just use this model inside Power BI. What this model does is it looks at image tags or image URLs. It analyzes the image, and then it classifies the image with some sort of tag in terms of what it finds inside the image. And it's been trained specifically on hotel images, so it's very domain specific. Now, in this particular case, my data scientist has built this model inside Azure, and all they had to do to share this with me in order to collaborate with me was give me permissions to the model. And that's a very quick operation inside Azure. They would just go into their access control, and they would say, I want to add a new role, and now they would add the business analyst in this case as a contributor to the model. So again, 2-click operation for the data scientist. In my case, the job is even easier. I didn't have to bring any of these models in. These models just automatically appeared for me because we automatically are able to detect which machine learning models you have gotten access to, which models you have been granted access. And then all I have to do is, just like we did with the cognitive services, I'm just going to map this model, what this model expects in terms of the data to my data. Now, in this case, this is a very simple schema. All it expects is an image, so that's all I'm going to provide it. But if we look at something like maybe my opportunity scoring model here, these could become a little bit more complicated. I might have to do things like map my sales stage, my purchase, process. So there could be multiple steps along the way. But in this case, it's very simple. I just want to use my image, and I'm going to invoke this model again. Again, a new step gets created. And what's really important about these steps is, now that I've gone ahead and transformed my data, once I save this data flow, the next time my data refreshes, all of these steps are just going to be carried out. So I myself will not have to do anything to actually run these transformations again. They're just going to be automatically carried out on top of new data. So again, we can see a new column has been created here. And I'm going to go ahead and expand this out. Because this could be a nested column. In this case, it is just an image tag. But again, if you think of something like an opportunity scoring model, I could have my close probability along with a label. So there could be 2 or even 3 columns that I might have over here. In this case, we just have our image tags, which we have brought in over here. And that's, pretty much all I had to do to bring in, a ton more structure into my data. So now I've got all of these 3 new columns that I can work with. So let's actually take a look at what I can do now that I have extracted out all of these new kind of columns inside my entity, what I can do with them inside Power BI Desktop. So I'm going to jump into my Power BI Desktop, and you can see, I've already gone ahead and loaded my data in from my Dataflows. I can very easily do that using the Dataflows connector. Just like we have a Power BI Datasets connector, you have a Dataflows connector that you can leverage. And here you'll see I've already started plotting a report. And on the left-hand side, I have all of my unstructured data that I've plotted. And here you'll basically see, we have our pictures that have been come in as part of the reviews alongside all of the text that has, been basically written down. And so again, this is our unstructured data. Let's see what we can do with all the AI enrichments that we carried out to add some structure to this. So the first thing I want to do is I want to actually unveil this word cloud that I've already created over here. And as you might guess, this is actually plotted based on all of the different key phrases that we extracted out from the text. So we just went ahead and plotted a word cloud with all of the trending, essentially, words. And we're going to see how we can leverage this in just a second. But let's actually create something from scratch. So I'm going to go into my customer, I'm going to go to my hotel customer table here. And I'm going to bring in my sentiment score. And I'm going to bring it in and break it down by my hotel name. So I have 5 different hotels over here. And this is a little bit hard to read. So I'm going to do is I've got this little hidden image here. And I'm just going to format this image to make it look better. And you can see very quickly that I can immediately take a look at which hotels have higher sentiment versus lower sentiment in my data. And I can select something like Palm Show Hotel over here, for example, which has generally a bit of a lower sentiment, to take a look at very quickly, which essentially reviews are associated with Palm Show. But I can see also which key phrases are trending with Palm Show Hotel. And so I can very quickly see here, for example, that construction is a word that's coming up. And so I might want to understand, how are my guests feeling about the construction that's ongoing? Maybe this is, something that they're very unhappy about. So I can just drill into my construction Palm Shore Hotel reviews and very quickly get an understanding of what's going on. Another thing I can do is not only can I plot this by sentiment score, but let's go ahead and copy this visual and change it from looking at sentiment score by hotel to actually bringing in our image tags that were brought in and generated by the machine learning model. And so I'm going to swap my image tag over here for the hotel name. And you'll notice over here that now we're looking at all of these image tags. First of all, we can see what were the kinds of things that the machine learning model tagged inside based on all of the images that we have. But then how is the sentiment associated with these images? And very precisely what this is saying is when someone posts a picture, let's say of the water view, is the review that they're posting positive or is it negative? In this case, we can see water views are pretty positive, and we can see some nice water views associated with this. I can do the same thing looking just at my views. So again, I can very quickly get an understanding of what are the kinds of things people like. And if we scroll down all the way down to the list, we can see what they are not so happy about when they're posting a picture. And the thing that is the lowest thing on our list is AC. So when people are on their Hawaii vacation, they're posting a picture of an AC, for whatever reason, they're not having a great time. And here we can see some pictures of broken, dirty, loud ACs that people are complaining about. They couldn't sleep, it was dirty and gross, and we can quickly get an understanding of, what it is that they're unhappy about. I can see a lot of these reviews are coming from Palm Shore and, are my other hotel that's kind of got very low sentiment. So I really should start taking a look at what is going on around here. Now, so this is, this showed you guys the ability of being able to leverage these AI enrichments that are one-click operations and very quickly add structure to your data and be able to leverage them directly inside your reports. Now, the final thing I wanted to show you as part of this demo is the ability to just use out-of-the-box AI visualizations inside Power BI. So you'll notice over here, and this is actually a preview feature. So as of today, if you want to use this, you're going to have to go into your options over here and you're going to have to go into your preview features and enable the key influencers visual. And so this is a new visualization type where we actually run some statistical analysis behind the scenes as part of the visual definition. So over here, I'm going to select this visualization. You'll see it behaves just like a normal Power BI visual. I can plot it on my report. I can, make it whatever resize it, make it whatever size I'd like. And now what I basically can do is I can just bind it to my data. So in this case, I'm going to look at a different table. I want to actually take a look at customers who are returning back to my hotel. So in this particular case, I have a field in my data model that looks at customers who returned versus did not return the following year. And so these are all customers who visited my hotel, and then some of them came back and some of them did not come back the next year. And I have a number of different attributes that describe these customers, such as maybe their age, which country they were visiting from, what was their primary interest to visit our hotel, did they purchase a spa visit, and so on. Now, if I want to analyze this data, again, I would normally have to, plot lots of visuals, kind of go in, break them down, figure out what's going on. But now with Power BI, if I just go into my customer table, I can simply ask Power BI to analyze, what actually influences a customer. So I'm going to bring in my customer field as the thing I want to analyze to be returning or not returning. And I want the question to be focused on the returning customers. I want to see what really brings someone back to my hotel the following year. And maybe, maybe their primary interest. So why did they visit us in the first place? That might have an impact. Now you'll notice as soon as I dragged this in, Power BI ran some analysis and it surfaced back results for me. And what it's telling me here is that when the primary interest is relaxation, my customers are 1.54 times more likely to come back than when they visited us for any other reason. On the right-hand side, we actually show you a representation of this data by just plotting your own data. So rather than just giving you a number, we actually do some transformations to the data to make it easier for you to consume this insight, and we show you your real data over here. And here you can actually see that about almost 16% of customers who visited us to relax came back. The average of everyone else is at about 10%. And so we can see that the success rate for our relaxation visitors, is much higher than for customers or guests who might be visiting us for sports or for a honeymoon, for example. And this is how Power BI handles one of these sorts of explanatory factors. But I can keep just adding explanatory factors, and you'll notice every time I add a new factor, Power BI just actually reruns the whole analysis and re-ranks everything for me. So now we can see that relaxation is actually not as important as some of the other factors in my data set. In fact, the most important thing over here is actually when we have visitors from the UK. So when someone is visiting us from the UK, they're over 2 times more likely to come back than if they're visiting us from any other country. And behind the scenes, we're actually, in this case, running a logistic regression to do all of this analysis. As of April, so as of last month, I'm just going to switch tabs just for a second. I just want to show you another visualization that I've plotted from, but leveraging the same visualization. But you can also see that we are able to also analyze numeric fields. So this is a very different scenario, and I'm not going to go through the scenario, but you'll just see that the question has changed to actually what influences, in this case, I'm interested in sentiment, to decrease or increase. And because we know that we're dealing with a numeric field. And here we're actually being told in this particular analysis, for whatever reason, if a patient visited the hospital on Tuesday, on average, they gave us much lower sentiment scores. And again, here, the visualization has rendered differently because it's a responsive visual. So it responds to how much canvas space it has. But you can see the analysis is actually running behind the scenes, it's running a linear regression. So we support the ability to bring in numeric fields as well as categorical fields. And we're also going to be introducing support for measures very soon. It's going to be coming in the next couple of months. I don't want to provide a precise time, but it's it's something that we're very much working on at the moment, and it's going to be ready very, very soon. So you're going to be able to drag in numeric fields, categorical fields, as well as measures over here. Now, if we jump back into this analysis, what's also really important to point out here is, because this is just a normal Power BI visual, if I select, for example, my 40 to 50-year-old customers here. So these are people who visited me who are in the range of 40 to 50-year-olds. The visualization just reruns this analysis, and we can see that actually now the top factor is no longer being from the UK, but actually purchasing a spa visit. So maybe for my 40 to 50-year-old customers, I want to give them a spa voucher because I know that this might encourage them to come back. The final thing I wanted to just showcase is, well, these this analysis shows me one basically influencer at a time. I can also jump into my top segments. And this looks at basically a group of factors. So over here, for example, we can see that in this particular case, we have a segment, and we found multiple segments, but our most important segment here is segment 1. And what segment 1 is saying is 26% of customers in segment 1 have returned back to my hotel the following year. So let's jump into segment 1 and take a look at it. So we find out that segment 1 is made up of Japanese guests who have purchased a spa visit. And when these two factors, when this combination of factors is true, we find that 26% of customers come back. And this is 14 percentage points higher than our average. So on average, our return rate is about 11, almost 12%. In this case, it's over 26%. And this makes up actually about 4% of the data. So it's a pretty substantial segment. And again, so here we make sure that we don't give you something that has maybe 1 or 2 data points. It's actually a substantial group in the population. So this is how an analyst can very quickly plot an AI visualization that runs some statistical analysis. Here, we're going to be running logistic linear regressions. Here, we run decision trees, and is able to just plot that as a visual in their report and share that with their business users to be able to consume and find insights. And so with that, I want to jump back into our framing slides. I wanted to just take a second to talk about something that comes up a lot in terms of questions that I get, which is if we jump back into the cognitive services for a second, often customers ask me, hey, well, when do I use cognitive services in Power BI versus when do I use cognitive services in Azure? And so this is a really important question, and it's got a pretty clear answer in terms of the use cases that make sense for each one. Cognitive services in Power BI is really designed for the business analyst, the BI professional. It's for someone who leverages tools like Power Query, Power BI Dataflows. They want to use these out-of-the-box point-and-click functions that generate M code behind the scenes, and they only want to really work inside Power BI. So this is important because in this case, cognitive services are restricted to the data that we have in Power BI. And they're not going to work in terms of plugging into other areas of maybe like if I want to use it on my Dynamics inside as a Dynamics workflow or as embedded into my web app. I can't do that. With cognitive services in Power BI, they just live in Power BI. And from a kind of billing perspective, they require a Power BI premium capacity, and they leverage capacity for doing all of the compute. Cognitive services in Azure, different persona. It's much more for the data engineer, data scientists. Like I said, in order to use them, you need to know Azure. You need to be able to code, use something like C# or maybe Python, Java. They live in Azure, so that means that they can be consumed as a web service by have lots of different entry points. So it could be part of a logic app. It could be part of a web app. So there's many different ways to consume that live outside of the Power BI realm. And there the billing model is Azure consumption, Azure subscriptions, Azure consumption rather than Power BI premium. So with that, I want to move into some of the more kind of machine learning kind of realm of the world. But I want to start with our Pro Data Science integration. So here, this is where we basically allow data scientists to extend Power BI with tools like R and Python. Again, we're not trying to compete with R and Python. We're just trying to make Power BI extensible. And there's really 3 different capabilities that we provide for in terms of R and Python, and both of them there's parity between R and Python here, is the ability, we have a get data connector. So if we jump into our connectors over here, I can basically bring in data leveraging R and Python scripts. I can carry out R and Python transformations as part of the Power Query experience. So if I jump into my edit queries over here, you'll see that as part of my transformation steps, what I can do is I can add a transformation that's based on running an R or Python script, and that's just going to pop up, a new kind of editor for me. And if I was to do some transformations, that would just create a new step inside the process. And finally, the integration that I really do want to focus on is the R and Python visualization integration. So here I've started plotting a report looking at a healthcare scenario. I'm looking at number of different metrics from a hospital, such as length of stay, readmission rates. I've got my sentiment by time. And I've got this placeholder visualization over here where I want to start looking at survey scores by time. And over here, survey scores, if we just look at our data really quickly, let me see over here, we have lots and lots of different hospitals and patients visiting, and they've been asked a number of different questions, such as, during this hospital stay, how often did, let's say, doctors treat you with respect? And someone answers, either always, never, sometimes, rarely. And so we've tallied up all of these results. We've broken them down into categories, and we want to actually plot a heat map right now as part of our kind of metrics over here. Now, the fact Power BI doesn't have a built-in heat map is not a problem because, again, I can easily extend Power BI with my Python and R visualizations. So let's see how this works. The first thing I have to do is actually bind my data, bind the visualization to my data. So I want to look at the category, so this is the kind of survey question category. I want to look at the average score that was given on a weekly basis. So I'm going to bring in my week number as well. So these are the three fields that I want to be leveraging inside my data model, inside my visualization. Now over here, I can pop up my Python editor, and I have this script over here that I've already prepared. So I'm just going to copy paste the script in, and we're going to go ahead and run this script. And you'll notice over here that, actually I could, if I go ahead and try and just type something, you'll see that we have a rich IDE experience for the visualizations. So if I want to, leverage just be able to write the script directly inside the Python script editor, I have a pretty nice authoring environment for that, as we've, integrated with VS Code over here. If I want to use an external IDE, I can do that too. So if I'm going to edit this in my external IDE, I could actually, in this case, I've configured it to work with VS Code, but I could be working with another IDE too. So, I could actually just author this inside this experience over here, iterate over it until I'm happy with it, and then basically, bring the script back into my Python script editor. So if we actually take a look at what we've plotted over here, we can see, I'm just going to get rid of the title. We can see we've plotted ourselves a heat map. And what we can, if we take a closer look, we can see that, what's really, again, kind of like we showed you with the AI visualizations, what's really valuable here is if I start, let's say, filtering my data. So let's actually try and look at a specific hospital inside King County, inside Washington. So I'm going to keep things a little bit local. And I'm going to find a hospital that has a pretty low sentiment. So here we plotted sentiment on the map. And so I want to look at, let's say, this hospital here that has low sentiment. That's going to update all of my metrics. And we're going to be able to take a look specifically for this hospital. What does do the survey scores look like? And so we can see over here, darker scores mean lower scores. That, for generally across the various categories, we've done pretty well. But our hospital environment and hospital experience scores have really, really been going down. So I want to focus and understand how people, why people are feeling unhappy about their hospital environment, hospital experience. Basically, because a Python, visualization is, again, we want to treat it like any other Power BI visualization. it cross-filtered automatically when I selected this hospital over here. So, and this is actually a really cool capability because as someone who used R and Python before I used Power BI, the ability to be able to automatically interact with my Python visualizations by, clicking things in a Power BI report and having that visual just automatically re-render is really powerful because I don't have to now write a script every time I want to, send a different portion of data through that visual. And I can do that without any effort, basically, which is actually very, very compelling. So this is kind of how you can extend Power BI with things like Python, with R. And the final demo I wanted to take you through is the ability to create machine learning models directly inside Power BI. And this is really more for this BI professional analyst persona rather than the data scientist who might be using tools like, Jupyter Notebooks and, Azure Machine Learning, Databricks. Here we really want to bring these capabilities directly to the analyst. So sticking with the kind of healthcare scenario, I'm going to jump back into my Dataflows. And another really cool capability of the Dataflows is the ability, you'll see this brain icon over here, to add machine learning models to a data flow. In this scenario, I'm looking at unplanned admissions to the hospital. So I have a number of hospitals in the network, and I want to be able to effectively allocate beds across these hospitals. In order to do that, I need to be able to forecast my demand for the next week or so and understand where I might have overcapacity and where I will have undercapacity. Admissions are generally made up of three things: my planned admissions, my discharges, or hospital capacity is made up of three things: my planned admissions, my discharges, but also my unplanned admissions. And the unplanned admissions are the really tricky ones because those are the ones that I need to be able to forecast accurately to figure out if I'm going to be over capacity. So we've gone ahead and actually brought in historical data looking at unplanned admissions for the past, couple of months and looking at it on, let's say, a weekly basis. And I'm going to just add a machine learning model here that's going to be built to be able to estimate my unplanned admissions for the following week. The first thing I need to do is I need to define what field I want to actually predict. So in this case, I'm going to be predicting my week unplanned admissions over here. And this is the field that basically I want to be able to predict for my future data where I don't have this field available yet. So I'm going to click next over here. And the next thing I need to do is choose a type of model that I want to be able to run. And in this case, I want to run a regression model because I want to estimate a numeric value. I want to estimate the precise number of people who will be coming to the hospital in that following week rather than a specific category. So I'm going to actually estimate a numeric value. And then the final thing I have to do is I just need to select fields that I might want to use as predictive fields. So these are the things that are going to actually help me explain my unplanned admissions for the week. And Power BI has done an intelligent selection for me already, but I can change these around if I would like to. And then all I have to do is, give my model a name. That's pretty much it. That's the only step that I have to do. And then Power BI, when I actually save this and refresh it, is going to do something very cool. We have integrated a technology called automated machine learning, automated ML, directly into Power BI. This is an Azure service that you can, again, use inside Azure if you want to leverage it via code. And what it does is once you define the field that you want to predict, what kind of model you want to run, and what fields you want to use to do the explaining, it's going to run and do feature selection, it's going to do algorithm selection, and it's going to do hyperparameter tuning. And it's going to iterate through lots and lots of combinations of algorithms and parameters to try and find the best possible model it can based on my data. And so, instead of me having to go and tweak these models and try things out, it's just going to do all the heavy lifting for me. Now, instead of saving it and actually running this model, because that will take a while, I want to show you a model that I have built on top of the exact same data. So I'm going to jump into my machine learning models. And you can see I've built a model here called estimated admissions. And when basically the model is done training, you are able to view this performance report that I'm loading right now. And this performance report is going to show me how well my model has performed, really. And I will be able to take a look at the metrics that come out of this. And we try and explain we try and keep consistent with data science language, because and that was not meant to happen. I have loaded it in earlier just in case something went wrong. So let's go into this one over here, where we try and stick with data science language that, data scientists would be used to using, such as, and metrics they would be used to, such as maybe their predicted values versus the actual values, residual errors, model performance. But then we also try and explain how to interpret these results for someone who might not be a data scientist. So we want to help educate analysts on, how they can understand these machine learning models, and they can share these reports with their data scientists who can also take a look to make sure that everything looks okay. We also tell you what was the final model type that was ran, as well as, how much data we sampled, how much data we validated across, and so on. And so if I'm happy with all of these results, what I can do is I can apply my model to a new potentially entity, or the same entity I had. I'm going to essentially create a new column, just like we did with the cognitive services in Azure ML, where we just have a new column. And in this case, the new column will be my actual estimated admissions for the following week. So let's actually take a look at what you can do with this data once it's inside Power BI. So here I've actually got a report that I've already gone ahead and plotted based on applying this model to my data. So this is going to take a second to load, and let me just refresh this. I'm just going to jump back into the starting page because it has some states that's already saved on it. Okay, so over here what we have is we have a table of all of the different, and I'm not sure why this is, sorry, bear with me one second. There we go. So over here we have a table with all of the different hospitals inside our network, along with the predicted overcapacity. So this is the field that we predicted inside our reports. And on the left-hand side, I've plotted a map where I can kind of quickly focus in on the problem areas where I might have more problems with overcapacity. So we can see we have some problems with Washington over here. So let's actually jump into Washington, and that's going to cross-filter my table. So here we can see all of our different Washington hospitals, and we can see there's 3 hospitals specifically that seem to be having a lot of problems with predicted overcapacity for the next week. So again, we have this data available to us on a row-by-row basis. We are able to score things on a hospital level, which hospitals have a high predicted overcapacity, and which ones, if we look lower down on the list, the good news is we have a lot of hospitals that really look okay. So maybe we can start, reallocating some of the people who come maybe to our Federal Way hospital to maybe one of our other hospitals that are nearby. But what I can also do with automated ML, which is really, really cool, is if I go ahead and select, let's say, this particular row inside my table, automated ML doesn't only give me row-level predictions, it also gives me row-level explanations. So I can see, for example, that over here where I had this value of predicted overcapacity of 22, we can understand how the machine learning model actually derived that value. So we can see everything that's kind of this reddish kind of waterfall chart that's here on the left-hand side that's pushing this number up are the things that are increasing my risk of overcapacity, and the things on the right-hand side are things that are reducing the risk of overcapacity. So we can see over here that we have things like, last week's unplanned admissions are high, and I can just hover over to show you. And this isn't a surprise. If my last week's unplanned admissions were high, there is some sort of time element here where maybe this week's will be high too. But then we see some other cool insights. For example, when the temperature is trending downwards. So this isn't saying that the temperature is low. it's saying that there's a change in temperature and the temperature is going from being a higher value to a lower value. That actually brings up my risk as well. And there are things that are reduced my risk. For example, the county average age. So the average age in the area is maybe not that high. It's between 35 to 50. That's actually reducing my risk. So what's great about this is we, again, try not to just provide a black box, but we try and provide you a tool that will give you predictions, but then will also help you understand your data and how that prediction came about so you can better action in on it. So with that, I just wanted to very quickly, again, go through this automated machine learning cheat sheet, which similarly to our cognitive services, this is just basically saying that, how are these different personas? One is for the business analyst versus the data scientist, skill set required, Power Query for Power BI, Azure, Python, Jupyter Notebooks for automated ML. Again, the model lives in Power BI versus the model lives in Azure and can be consumed by other applications. Automated ML requires Power BI Premium. Automated ML in Azure requires an Azure subscription. So again, different use cases, different personas for this capability. So with that, I just wanted to leave a couple of minutes to the end and see if there are any questions about any of the capabilities that I showed today, or other things maybe about AI with Power BI.
Thank you, Justyna. Yeah, we have a couple quick questions.
Yeah.
Guess to answer a lot of them. We're recording the webinar and we'll be posting it on our YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm.
And Justyna, I think whenever you have, I don't know if you have a blog you post on that you share your PowerPoint slides with. I know a lot of your presentation was a live demo, so I'm not sure what they want out of the PowerPoint slides, but
I can share. I mean, I can send the slides over to you, but
okay.
I don't. There's no centralized place I would be sharing them. But I'm happy to
Okay.
share them with whoever is interested.
Alrighty, yeah, we could do that. You can just send it to myself and Nathan. We can get it out there. If not, I mean, like I said, we have it on our YouTube channel, so you guys can follow along on there as well, or review it if you guys missed the presentation. I guess to get with questions, is there a specific amount of data you need to make the predictions or the assumptions?
Yes. So in order to make the predictions for automated ML, I don't remember off the top of my head, but I think you need at least 50 observations in each category, or 50 observations if it's a numeric field that you're trying to predict over on a continuous spectrum. But if Power BI detects that you don't have enough data, it will give you a warning and say, hey, you need at least this much data to really get meaningful results. So if you don't have enough data, we will kind of warn you about that.
Okay. Also, the integration with the Azure machine learning, that's available only on premium only, correct?
Azure machine learning integration is pro.
Okay, okay.
The automated machine learning is premium only. Azure is where the data scientist has built the model in Azure and is sharing it with the Power BI user. That's available for everyone. If you want to build your own machine learning models directly in Power BI, that's a premium feature because it requires a lot of compute. So it's just only way to really offer it at a scalable way.
All right. I guess the last question would be, I guess dealing with SSRS. I guess is Power BI pretty much directing all the presentations of SSRS into Power BI? I guess someone asked.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
I guess Microsoft stopped offering SSRS and directing all presentations of data needs to Power BI.
I mean, SSRS is still exists. There's still a team who's definitely working on SSRS, but a lot of the future roadmap is about how we can better integrate SSRS with Power BI. And so how you can we have some new capabilities where you can publish your S report directly into, for example, the Power BI workspace. So it's really there. I don't know exactly the investments they're making because I'm not from, I don't work on the SSRS side of the product. So it's hard I don't want to kind of maybe, go down a route where I'm maybe misrepresenting things. But, I would encourage you to reach out to, if there's a question around the roadmap for SSRS, to reach out to, again, joining SSRS and probably help more.
Yeah, also whoever asked that question, if you look up, just Google magnetic reports and take a look at that as well. It's kind of something I've actually played around with as well. It's kind of similar to SRS within Power BI. Alrighty, Justyna. Well, I'm gonna upload the remaining questions so we don't run out of time.
Sure, awesome.
And
Well, thank you so much, yeah, for your time, and yeah, hope everyone enjoyed the presentation.
Yeah, got a lot of good feedback, and thank you for your time. It was a really good hands-on presentation.
And thank you so much.
Thank you everyone for joining today.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.